Hi, my name is James Orvis, and today we're going to look at analog loop processing. Basically, just a few examples in how we can use analog processing techniques to make loops sound a little bit warmer, add a bit of glue across the mix and things like that. So we're going to start just by listening to these 5 loops that I put together, taken from the Surface pack. And then what we're going to do is individually go through each sound, add a little bit of processing to each one, but all the techniques are going to be different, so I can give you a good toolkit of analog processing. And then at the very end, we'll do an A/B test of the whole loop as a whole. The results are very, very subtle, but I feel like they go a long way on an overall mix. And I recommend using monitors, preferably, or if you've got a good pair of headphones, use them as well. And so let's get stuck in. So this is the overall loop. So there's the loop, and now what we're going to do is go through each individual sound, starting with these drums here. So let's have a quick listen to the drums on their own. So they're already sounding really, really nice and very analog anyway, quite organic as well. But what we're going to do is just add a little bit more of that. So what I've got here is Slate Digital's London preamp. So in the Slate pack, you get like loads of different preamps in the pre's here, and I just usually go through and find out which one suits the loop or the sound, and this one seemed to work really well. I don't overdo it, but the results are quite nice. So you can use this red meter here and you can dial it in like this. So you can make it quite crunchy with that. It's quite nice, quite warm. But what I tend to do is to just kind of dial it in a little bit so it's not too much. So let's have a quick A/B of this. So yeah, that's just adding a nice bit of grit at the bottom there. So you can experiment with different preamps and try different things out. Normally preamps, you just use them for sending microphones into the desk and things like that, but I find it's really nice to kind of use it to just warm up loops like this. The next one we're going to look at is this top loop. So what we're going to do for this technique is I'm going to use vinyl noise. So I've got this vinyl plugin by Isotope, and what we're doing here is we've set it on a different channel. I'll just play this now so you can hear what this is doing. So we've got a little bit of dust coming through there as well, so this dust knob here, and I've set it to 1930, so it's more kind of like high end. It hasn't got much low in it, so if you go to like 2000, it's got like loads of low end in it. What I wanted is just that kind of fizzy, kind of nice, airy top end of the noise to go in with the loop. So the way that we do this is, instead of just playing that, which you can do as well, what I'm going to do is use the gate. So the gate is sidechained to the top loop, and what that means is the volume, so the peak levels of the top loop, open up the gate, so you can see it bouncing here. And I find it's just a really nice way to make the noise gel more with the original loop and also go in time with the rhythm. And then lastly, all I've got here is an EQ, and we can use this to just kind of sculpt out the noise a little bit more. So maybe take away some of the low end. I might actually boost the top end a little bit as well. Oh, there's quite nice. And what I'm going to do now is just dial it in with the original loop. So I'll press play. And actually, before we do that, I'll just quickly mention the gate. So basically, play around with the attack and stuff like that as well. So what I've done is set this to 95 milliseconds, and that just means that we don't get this kind of stuff going on. So if I bring the attack right down, you get like a click at the start. And what I don't want to do is that to interfere with the transients of the original sound. So the transients hits and then the noise comes in. And then you've got hold and release as well. So release gives you this. I find that longer release makes it sound a little bit more natural and it's not choppy, but you can play around with that and get different rhythms out of it as well. I tend to blend this in quite subtly, but you can bring it in quite drastically if you wish. So let's go ahead and start to dial this in. I'll bring it all the way up and then we'll find a nice sweet spot. About there's right for me, just really, really subtle, so that works quite well. And let's move on to the next one. So this next one, we've got this bass here. I'll just turn everything off. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to reamp it. I've got Guitar Rig open, but we're not technically sending it through an amp head. We're just sending it through the speaker, and then we're recording that in a room with a mic. You can play around with the mic placements and stuff as well. So this is just like a really nice way to kind of give it some realism. What I've done here is just use Control Room Pro. I've used the 60s green the speaker cabinet, and then we've got the Dynamic 421, which is like the Sennheiser microphone. I found that works really nice and brought some of the bright side of it out, because some of the microphones, when you use this technique, it can sound quite dull. And same again with the speaker cone placement as well of the microphone. I found that the middle wasn't as bassy, so you kind of use these three settings as a kind of EQ to sweeten it a little bit. And then we've got this room here as well. So what I found was like 50% gives it some nice kind of ambience. And then what I wanted to do to take it a little bit further, be a little bit more creative, was to pan this channel all the way to the left. And I don't know if you noticed, but on the Control Room Pro, you've got these 8 kind of channels here, which are like mixer channels. So if we go to 2, I've got another setup as well, and I pan this to the right. So on this one, I'm using an AC Blue cabinet, and then we've got a ribbon mic, and again, stuck it in the middle. So I've tried to find 2 sounds that work really nicely, and then I've blended them together and panned them left and right. What we'll do actually is we'll have a quick listen to each of those individually. So if I turn 2 down, let's open this up and solo this. So there's your first one. Let's reset that. And then the second one sounds like this. So I'll bring that down. I could have just pressed mute actually on the bottom. And let's bring this one up. So very, very similar, but once you've panned them and balanced them, so you can use this meter at the top to balance the left and right channels out, like this. And then what I did then is to mix that signal in with the original signal. So I've got the original signal here on this clean channel, and then the amp is there. And then I dialed it in until I got to -7.5, where I found it fit quite nicely. So this is on its own. And then with the amp. So for me, it's very subtle, but it gives it a bit of a thicker sound. The original loop compared to that sounded a little bit thin. Not to say that the original loop is sounding thin, but you could have like fixed that with EQ a little bit. But I just think that like the amp gives it this nice kind of warm buzziness in the lower mids. And that's kind of what we're after with this type of stuff. It's just adding that a little bit more to thicken up the sound, make it sound a little bit more analog. And the next one we've got is this synth loop. So this next technique is one that you've probably seen me use quite a lot in tutorials, because it's just my go-to technique for every sound in the mix or drum buses and things like that, is to use a tape and channel combination from Slate. So I like to use this virtual tapes machine. And you can play around with the settings, but I really like 456 on 15 IPS. That just works for me really nicely. And I usually switch this over to the 16 track as well. And then the other one is the channel. I always find that the Brit 4KE works nicely for me, but you can play around with these. And normally I'm quite subtle with the gain on these, but I think with this, I boosted them a little bit. So what I like about this as well, you've got the links there. So as you dial in this, it turns down the output as well, so you can always A/B it with the original. So let's do a quick A/B of that. So yeah, you'll see this light go off here when I click it off on MIDI controller. So again, very subtle, but just adds a bit of warmth and thickness to that. This is a very subtle technique, but what I would do then is start off with the tape and channel and combine some of these other techniques, or all of them, and then you get this kind of really nice warm sound with that. And the next one, and the final one we're going to look at, is one that was a little bit experimental. I've never tried this before, but we're going to use this Abbey Road Studios Waves plugin called the Kins microphone. And basically it's like a replication of running the signal through these old microphones that the King and Queen used back in the day. Very weird. Abbey Road's probably got a selection of these in a cabinet somewhere, and that's how they've done this collaboration with Waves. But it's quite a cool concept, and it is giving it that kind of analog edge, quite drastically actually. So it gets rid of a lot of the low end on this plate, which I kind of wanted anyway, because the bass and the synth kind of take up that low mid area. I didn't want this pad sound to be overbearing and swamp the rest of the mix. So I'm kind of using this technique as an EQ as well, which I mentioned earlier. So this is what the pad sounds like on its own. So massive difference, kind of eye-passes the sound a lot. And then what I wanted to do, just to make the sound a bit thicker and warmer without adding loads of bottom end, is to add lustrous plate. Again, which is kind of adding to this analog stuff, because plates are analog. You know, you send in a signal into a real world plate and then bringing it back through the desk again. So this is what this sounds like. Just adding a little bit of warmth on the bottom end. And then lastly, EQ, just to bump up that low end a little bit, because I felt like it was too high passed. So next we're going to look at the overall loop, and we're just going to A/B between the two. So just keep an eye on these here, and you will see me flick them on and off. There you go. So let's listen to it with off and then on again. So it's quite subtle, I mean, to untrained ears, but I think it's a massive difference, especially when you do that over the whole mix. And it just gives it that kind of sheen and that polish that we miss in the digital realm. So it's definitely something worth looking into. And it's quite hard to overdo these things as well, because these are quite subtle techniques. If you're smashing sounds through like decapitator and overdrive and saturation, it can give some really pleasant results, but it's not something that I would recommend using across the overall mix. I mean, you can do it, but you need some kind of subtle elements as well to have the contrast between the really distorted stuff and something that's a bit subtler, so it gives it this nice contrast. And I feel like using these as the base to kind of warm up your mix is a good starting point, and then you can go ahead and really destroy some of the sounds that you want to in the mix. Hope this has been very, very useful. If you've got any techniques that you love to use, I would love to hear about those. Pop them in the comment section below, and if there's anything that you want us to cover or discuss, please also let us know that. My name's James Orvis, and I will catch you next time.